Imagine being so money hungry, so afraid that your crimes that you've committed come to light, that you end up slaughtering your entire family at just 15 years old. This is the story of the Griekwastad Murders. My name is Tanisha Kaiser, and welcome to my True Crime YouTube video. It's the 6th of April, 2012. Deon Steenkamp rushes into the police station. He shouts, "Hulle is geskiet, hulle is geskiet." In English, they've been shot, they've been shot. He tells the police officers that there's been a murder on his farm, or a farm murder on his parents' farm. He said that his mother, father, and sister had been shot. He then goes to hand over the weapons that had been dumped on the farm over to the police. Deon explained to the police that when the attack occurred, he was in the barn, which is like 32 meters away from the house. His parents and his sister, they were in the house and they were watching Vetkoekpaleis. Do you remember Vetkoekpaleis? Happy memories, sad story, but like, you remember now. Anyway, they inside, they're watching Vetkoekpaleis. Deon's in the barn when he hears gunshots going off. And then he's like, okay, I'm gonna hide here and wait until the gunshots die down. He hears it, die down. He's like, okay. He thinks it's safe. He goes into the house, and that's where he sees his mother, Steenkamp, and his father, Deon Steenkamp, had been shot. They're not moving. He's like, okay, I think they've passed. His sister Martella had also been shot, and when he saw her, she fell against him, grabbing his shirt, which caused it to tear. She falls to the ground. He picks her up and holds her in his arms, and that's when she says, "Ek is lief vir jou boetie." Then she passes in his arms. This is Deon's story. No? This is Deon's story. This is his description of what happened on that day when this farm attack occurred. Police would soon discover, for obvious reasons, that the story wasn't exactly adding up. And throughout the investigation, obviously they still investigate to see perhaps what really happened. They discovered that things were not as Deon described. A little bit off. So, before we get into that, let's talk about Deon's upbringing. What could have possibly led to this young man, very obviously in this case, being the murderer? Deon's parents, Deon and Christel, met while they were studying. Soon after they got married, they moved to Deon's parents' farm in Nouhoek, in Griekwastad. They made a lovely home for themselves, and they became a part of the community, just your average, typical Afrikaans family. So the pair made a beautiful life for themselves. Not long after came Deon, born on the 14th of August 1996, and a year later came Martella. Deon wasn't as outgoing and extroverted as Martella, and he didn't have as many friends. He was described as pretty quiet compared to her. Nothing wrong with that, just opposites. She was beautiful, intelligent, and also quite popular. But despite their differences, they had a really good relationship. They spent a lot of time together, they did activities, they went horse riding, they went swimming on the farm. Deon and Christel, his mother, they had a very strong mother-son relationship, like a really good bond. And Martella and her father had a really good bond. And Christel, his mother, was also very protective over him. So it's like, it sounds overall that there was no abuse or neglect, or that he was excluded. It sounded like, they even went on holiday together. So, typical Afrikaans family, no red flags. Deon was only 15 when this took place, so there's not much else background that I can give. He was just becoming a teenager still, so all of this, that was basically their whole background. No abuse, no neglect, nothing that could lead us to why and what happened that day. This brings us to the day of Don's family's murder. Don told the police his story, and that investigation began immediately. Don was taken home by an uncle, so he wasn't arrested or apprehended or anything like that. He went home and awaited the funeral. As the police investigation unfolded, Don continued to live his life, and what was left of his family, well, not immediate family, but extended family members, they went on to bury and mourn the loss of their family. People during this time, obviously they heard Don's version of events, like he's staying with his uncle, that people are asking what happened, and he tells them, oh, there was a farm attack, it's a farm murder, and he's at the funeral, he's crying, and it looks like he's mourning, but everybody else is like, like they're crying, they're crying, but they're also like, but they can't say anything, and nobody wants to say anything, but everyone's like, After or during the funeral, the police investigation is taking place. We're going back there now, okay? Police, they say, okay, the house wasn't broken into. They're investigating, they're on the property. No, the house wasn't broken into. Nothing was stolen. Nothing. There was jewelry, there were computers, there were TVs, money, guns. The keys of the bakkie were still in the bakkie. Are you telling me that on this farm attack, they didn't steal anything? So already the police, they were like, nah, none of this is really making sense. Also, the biggest thing, the murder weapons were left behind. These farm murderers came onto the farm. Important detail, the weapons used in this farm attack belonged to the Steenkamps, and they were kept in a safe. So what Don says, they snuck past the family while they were in the house watching Veerkoekpaleis. Snuck past them, managed to get into the safe, or maybe the safe was open, took the weapons, killed the whole family, then left the murder weapons behind, and then just took off. Nothing was making sense. So obviously, there was no evidence that anyone else was there either. Don was the only person on the scene. So with that being said, there were no suspects except for Don. Professor Gerard Labuschagne weighed in on this case during the investigation and said, well, I don't know if he was in the investigation or if it was just the documentary that I watched that he weighed in on this case, but he said that one of the weapons was used to incapacitate the victims and the other one was used to execute them. So those victims, his mother and father, saw the perpetrator. They knew it was happening to them. It was just like an eerie detail. Like, you have to really be completely devoid of any emotion, empathy. You can't have anything behind your eyes if that is how you go about killing your family. Not that there's an okay way to go about it. Just an interesting point there. Also, what was discovered during the investigation is that Martella, they found evidence that Martella had been shot, ran outside to flee the house, and then had been shot again. She was dragged inside. Then she tried to reach the telephone, but was too weak to use it. So the house phone, she was too weak. And then she was killed inside. The person that committed this crime was really intent on ensuring that this family was completely wiped out. With all this being said, Don is the only suspect. He's the only person that could have committed this crime. There's no evidence of anyone else being there, and he's the one that alerted the police to this crime. So it must be Don. On the 21st of August 2012, Don was arrested and he was charged with the murders of his entire family. The most shocking part of this case, and it's all sad, don't get me wrong, but we're looking for motive here, right? And this could be one of the reasons that Don committed this crime. During the discovery, they did an autopsy of Martella's body, and they found that she had been sexually assaulted or raped before she was murdered. And throughout the investigation, they discovered that she had been raped multiple times before this. This led police to believe that Don was the one committing this assault on his own sister, which his motive for wanting to murder both his parents and his sister. The night before the murders, Deon and Christel, they were visiting friends. So Martella and Deon were left alone at home. So police think that this is when the sexual assault occurred. And it's possible that Martella threatened to tell their parents, and that is why Don committed this crime. It's a possibility. When people became aware of this, it completely changed their perception of Don. They were like, oh, it's either he's a monster or this is so unimaginable that it can't even be true. There was also another motive. So Don's family was quite wealthy, and he, if Martella wasn't there, would be the sole inheritor. So he actually had two motives. And this is what the prosecution would bring up. They would say he wanted to remove any consequences of his actions for violating his sister. And then it's also, he'd be the sole inheritor to his entire family's farm. But of course, he's 15, so he doesn't think of a reasonable story. Like, it's not believable. Even from the first time I read it, I was like, what is him? You know? The trial began in March 2013, and the media was allowed in the court, which is very uncommon in cases where the perpetrator or the accused is underage. But Don did not oppose this because he was confident that he would be found innocent. He claimed he had absolutely nothing to hide. During the trial, it was found that after the murders had occurred, Don was texting with a friend, and this friend asked, do you think that they'll find the suspect? And he was like, doubt it. They won't find any fingerprints on the crime scene. Basically incriminating himself, because how would you know that? You said that there were other people at the crime scene or that committed this murder, so how could you know that there wouldn't be any fingerprints? Did you see them? Did you see that they had gloves on? How could you know that? Incriminating himself. Many expert witnesses were called to the stand to testify, but the most important, or the one that stood out the most, was the person that gave evidence on the blood spatter. So they said that his story didn't match what he said happened with Martella, with her falling on him and dying in his arms. It was more likely that a struggle had broken out because Don had his own blood on his clothing. So her dying in his arms, why would he be bleeding? And he only found out about this in court. Shocker. That would be shocking. If I was the perpetrator, I would be like, the judge that was presiding over the trial went to the Steenkamp home to see where it all took place. Don was also there. And he was like explaining, but during this investigation, it found that it wasn't possible. Also, I forgot to mention this, but Don said that he went to warn the farm workers when he heard gunshots again. And that's when he was like, And then he found the weapons, and then he took the weapons and he... Girl, basically they were like, this doesn't make any sense. Okay, now we know it was Don. It was Don. Okay, it was him. It was him. It was him. 15 years old. Sexually assaults his sister for who knows how long. Murders his mother, father, and his sister. So, during the trial, naturally, the question of whether Don was a psychopath came up. I was like, it's important to note, though, that children are often not diagnosed in their early years, because as you grow, your personality changes. And there's sometimes this thing where maybe you are like just an evil child, like you're just evil, and your personality normalizes over time. So maybe you were evil at 15 and then you can become normal, or it can develop into a personality disorder, such as being a psychopath or a sociopath, or even a true narcissist. What was interesting was that the psychologist that evaluated Don said that there were no signs of psychopathy. No signs that could say that he would become a psychopath or become a... I was like, wait, what? No signs in his childhood. Besides the parent-child relationship that often causes that type of personality disorder to form. He didn't have any of that. But he also didn't have violent outbursts or behavioral issues, or he wasn't violent towards animals. He was like a normal kid. So she could find no evidence that he was a psychopath or a sociopath, which is crazy. And what the point of that is, just it makes it very difficult to explain why this happened, why he did what he did. It's very difficult for people to think that someone can just snap. I wouldn't even call it snapping. It hurts my brain. This one hurts my brain. Don testified in court, and the prosecution challenged him, stating that this just wasn't true. Based on the evidence, this was not a farm attack. But Don stood firm. He stood firm that this was a farm attack. He stood firm in his innocence. And even when he was challenged, he appeared confident, unmoved, even emotionless at times. Even when he was caught in a lie, he did not flinch. Is that not like psychopathic behavior though? Because in my mind, if I was being accused of murdering my family, I would have a mental breakdown. Maybe he was having a mental breakdown. Throughout the trial, all these things came out. But the fact is that there was no evidence against Don. Everything was circumstantial, but because there was no other explanation besides it being Don, the court was satisfied with the circumstantial evidence. The judge in the case, when sentencing Don, said, "As jy nie wil hoor nie, moet jy voel." Which means in English, if you don't want to hear, then you must feel. Which, I don't know, I'm not a judge. But honestly, that's, to me, sounds very appropriate to say to a child. And one that I don't think understands the gravity of what he had done. Or maybe he did. I don't know. This one boggles my mind. Don has since still not admitted guilt. And he will be in prison for 25 years before he can apply for parole. His grandmother stood with him through the trial. And even after the guilty verdict, she said she forgives him for what he may have done. Family members have pleaded with him to tell the truth, but he has never admitted to committing those murders or abusing his sister. None of it. So there's a book that I've been reading. It's called The Most Evil of Them All, where Dr. Sam Human, I'm not sure, points out that a possible personality disorder for Don is narcissistic personality disorder. And she points out, I'm reading and I'm trying to connect the dots, and to me, this is what I found. Before I go there, narcissistic personality disorder is part of the DSM-5, and it's also similar to antisocial personality disorder, which was also known as sociopathy, and also close to psychopathy, right? The narcissists that we are more familiar with talking about are very extroverted, vain, grandiose, they have great self-importance. What's less known is the introverted narcissist, the vulnerable one. Dr. Heman tries to make a point that Don has a lot of the traits of someone with narcissistic personality disorder, by way of he has a lack of empathy. The way that he went on with his life, according to the book, right after his family was murdered, he went on living like nothing happened. He even went as far as to find out about selling his family's farm so that he can start a business. I'm sorry, but I don't think that any person in their right mind that just lost their family would be thinking of starting a business. Also, at 15, you would be lost. You wouldn't be thinking of, oh, what can I gain from my family's death? And for me, all I would want is my family back. Something like that would take years to get over. Anyway, basically this points to a lack of emotion and a lack of empathy, one of the traits of narcissistic personality disorder, or NPD. Let's just call it NPD. Not only that, but discarding of his family to achieve his personal goals, whether it was discarding them so that they don't find out about his abuse of his sister, or if it was about getting rid of his family so that he can be the sole inheritor to the farm. It reveals a sense of entitlement. The farm belonged to him, and his sister was his to abuse and use as he wanted to. This also points to a sense of self-grandiose and self-importance. In court, as I mentioned, Don was very confident in everything that he was saying in court. He was confident he wouldn't be caught. He was confident that he would be found innocent, and it was reported that he was sometimes found looking smug. Let me hold my opinions on this boy to myself, but looking smug at times, smirking at various junctures throughout the trial. So this points to a sense of arrogance. Like, you must be extremely arrogant to think that you could get away with something done honestly, need to choose my words wisely, but poorly. Only a 15-year-old would think something like this up, but you wouldn't think a 15-year-old would think something like this up. Okay, here we have at least 5 of the behaviors that fall under narcissistic personality disorder, so it is a possibility, but of course we can't say for sure until Don is re-evaluated. I couldn't find anything about that. I would love to know if anybody knows. Please let me know in the comments, because this one racks my brain. I know there's also Henry van Breda, which I also want to do. But he was older, right? I think he was older. And 15. I do think that he has a personality disorder. I do understand you can't pick it up at 15, or you can't say for sure, like, this is who he is because he might grow out of it. But imagine he's 2 years younger than I am. Imagine he's 29 now. So what if he grew out of it? That means that he's 29 and he looks back on his life and he's like, oops, that doesn't make sense. And if that's true, then he's got, honestly, a life of torture ahead of him. If he was to be released, I don't know what his life would be like. How do you go on? Honestly, if I had grown out of it, I wouldn't be able to go on. I wouldn't be able to look back on my life and be like, my family's gone because of me and I'm still here. And now I'm free. I shouldn't be free. You know? And what if they do? I wonder if he can, like Edmund Kemper, he killed his grandparents at 15 years old. Well, I think it was 15, but at a young age. And then was put in a mental hospital. And over the years, he learned how to trick the psychologist into thinking that he was mentally fine. And by the time I think he was 21 years old, he got out. And then he became the co-ed killer. And I believe, I'm just speaking from memory now, but I believe he ended up murdering 9 women after that. Because he was able to trick the system. After his psych evaluation, they were like, this guy is fine. And because, what if this guy is able to do the same thing? Oh my gosh. I'm scared. Yeah, this case, I chose this case because I thought it was really interesting. I couldn't wrap my mind around how a kid could do something like this. I know that there are horrible things happening all over the world and there are horrible people that exist, but like, to hear something like this in South Africa was shocking to me. And then that the fact that there's no evidence of abuse in his childhood, he didn't grow up with behavioral issues or killing animals or bedwetting or any of the telltale signs that somebody is going to become this type of person. It's insane to me. Anyway, that is the story of how Deon Steenkamp murdered his mother, Griekwastad Steenkamp, his father, Deon Steenkamp, and his younger sister, Steenkamp. This is a chilling one, if ever. From the information that I've given you, right, I would really love to know what you think. I think he has antisocial personality disorder, which is like a sociopath. He's a sociopath. And then there's psychopath, or I don't think schizophrenic, because he didn't say he had hallucinations or anything like that. Is he a psychopath? I think antisocial personality disorder, because it was so disorganized, but at the same time he was only 15 years old. Anyway, that's enough of what I think. Thank you for watching. Please let me know what you think in the comments below. I do hope that he is reevaluated properly. And I mean, if he can admit guilt and can say that he is sorry for what he's done, then I don't know. I don't even know if someone should be let out of prison or not. That is not for me to decide. That is why I'm here on camera and not in court. So let me know what you think. Do you think he should be let out? Do you think so? Let me know what you think. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next week.